Welcome to the European Parliamentary Research Service podcasts.
In this podcast, we'll talk about pollinators, the key role they play in nature, the threats they face, and the EU action to protect them. Stay with us.
They might not be your favourite insects out there, but without them, we wouldn't have much left to eat, and could even go extinct. Now, what makes them so special?
Basically, their role as pollinators. The vast majority of Europe's native flora and crops depend on insects, like bees, for pollination. And we have a rich diversity of them in Europe, including over 2,000 species of bees, about 500 butterfly species, and almost 1,000 species of hoverflies. But many of these wild pollinators are under threat and declining.
According to the European Red List of Bees, around 9% of all bee species are threatened in the EU, and the EU Grassland Butterfly Indicator has recorded a 39% decline in grassland butterflies since 1990.
And this puts us all at risk. Worldwide, changes in pollinators' diversity and numbers have generally led to a loss of crops and wild plants. And as wild plants provide food and shelter for many other species, this can have cascading effects within entire ecosystems.
So, what is the EU doing to protect them? Vivienne Halleux is the European parliamentary research expert on this subject.
The EU counts a number of laws that directly or indirectly protect pollinators, including the regulatory framework on pesticides, the Common Agricultural Policy, and the LIFE programme, which funds projects on nature and biodiversity. But it's the EU Habitats Directive, together with the Birds Directive, that form the cornerstone of nature conservation in Europe and led to the establishment of the Natura 2000 network of protected areas, which protects some key habitats for pollinating insects.
The Habitats Directive also protects certain pollinator species, including butterflies, moths, and beetles. And the EU has also taken action against invasive alien species, such as the Asian hornet, which preys on honeybees and other pollinator insects.
And what does the pesticides legislation say about the protection of bees and other pollinators?
Well, here as well, rules governing the approval of pesticides require taking into account pesticide effects on honeybees. And the European Food Safety Agency is currently reviewing its guidance on the risk assessment of pesticides on bees, which was actually never adopted, at least formally, due to reluctances from member states.
One key aspect of the review process is the setting of specific protection goals, defining the maximum acceptable level of harm to bees, on which EU ministers have recently agreed.
So, have all these initiatives and legal protection mechanisms succeeded in protecting wild pollinators?
A 2020 report from the European Court of Auditors concluded that EU initiatives taken so far to protect wild pollinators have been too weak to bear fruit, and suggested stronger action to be taken.
Although progress has been made in the implementation of the EU Pollinators Initiative, adopted in 2018 to tackle the decline of wild pollinators, more needs to be done, in particular to address the loss of habitats in farming landscapes and the impacts of pesticides.
In an analysis of the potential for cap measures to support wild pollinators on farmland, experts found that ecological focus areas largely fail to deliver the necessary pollinator resources in agricultural landscapes.
And sometimes, even if the intention is there, the lack of proper knowledge about wild pollinators makes national plans ineffective. But there is hope.
There is always hope. Both the EU biodiversity and the farm-to-fork strategies set out specific targets for nature conservation and restoration that can help advance pollinator conservation. Although integrating them into the new CAP, however, remains a major challenge.
This issue is at the heart of the European Parliament's efforts on conservation. Here's Vivienne Halleux from the European Parliamentary Research Service.
In its resolution on the EU biodiversity strategy for 2030, Parliament called for an urgent revision of the EU Pollinators Initiative with stronger monitoring measures, clear time-bound targets and indicators, and more resources. The Parliament also made clear that the revision of the European Food Safety Authority B guidance document should ensure a level of protection at least equivalent to that laid down in 2013.
Members of the European Parliament also called for a ban on all neonicotinoid-based pesticides and the inclusion of EU-wide binding pesticide reduction targets in the upcoming revision of the directive on the sustainable use of pesticides.
But will their calls be heard?
Well, they should. It's our own survival on the line. Read more about it on the EPRS website.
This is a European Parliamentary Research Service podcast.
Thanks for listening.